Classified briefing, 2015. Asset SNTL07 presumed KIA. Retrieval not cost-effective. Cut to present-day footage of a tranquil Ridge Valley meadow, where that same asset, gray-muzzled but unbroken, walks perimeter rounds beside three pups that shouldn't exist. How did a dog declared dead by the military not only survive, but sire a lineage that now threatens to expose a black-budget program? The answer begins with an 8-year-old cancer patient who refused her own prognosis and ends with a viral leak shaking Capitol Hill. This episode traces the breadcrumb trail from cryogenic DNA theft to hidden airstrips to a midnight motel raid, proving that sometimes the only way to shut down a weaponized secret is with the loyalty it underestimated. Stay till the end to see how one dog toppled an entire shadow operation. The wind in Ridge Valley carried a certain stillness, not silence, but a hush, like the forest was holding its breath. Lena Avery stepped past the last warning sign, the metal creaking slightly in the breeze. 22 years old now, her long braid tucked into the collar of a khaki field jacket. She walked softly, her boots careful against the pine needles, the same way she approached grieving animals in recovery pens. Despite her credentials as an animal behaviorist, this part of the sanctuary was off-limits to nearly everyone. But today, a call had changed everything. They said he wouldn't let anyone near, the ranger had muttered over the radio. Except her. She hadn't believed it. Not really. Not until now. The trees thinned into a clearing dotted with wild grasses and sun-faded logs. It was there. At the far edge of the clearing she saw the figure. A German shepherd. Massive. Still as a statue. Dark coat mottled with mud and time. The kind of presence that demanded respect, even from the wind. Lena froze mid-step. He stood squarely in her path, body low but alert, ears rigid, his eyes locked onto hers, ice and fire fused together. No growl, no bark, just a gaze that scraped at something buried deep in her chest. Behind her, the rangers kept their distance. She heard the soft clatter of a tranquilizer rifle being readied. A breath caught in someone's throat. "Don't shoot," she said, barely audible. The German shepherd didn't move. Lena slowly lowered her satchel, letting it rest on the mossy earth. Then she did something no one expected. She knelt. The dog didn't flinch, but his breathing changed. Slower now, measured, as if deciding something ancient. The moment stretched. Then, like a thread snapping in the quiet, the shepherd took one deliberate step forward, and another, and then he lay down, not in submission, but in surrender, forelegs stretched before him, chin resting on the ground. His eyes never left hers. Lena's fingers trembled. Her throat burned with the pressure of years unspoken. The world blurred around the edges. Not because of the sun, but because her body remembered what her mind had dared forget. She stepped closer, slowly. The dog didn't move. When she reached him, she lowered herself onto her knees again. Her hand hovered over his fur, afraid to touch, afraid it might break the spell. But then his head lifted, just slightly, and nudged her hand. She exhaled. Her palm settled on his brow, right between the ears, the spot he used to like, back when he was only hers. The weight of his skull, the warmth of his breath, the faint scent of earth and pine. It was all still him. Worn, scarred, older than she remembered, but unmistakably him. "Ragnar?" she whispered, her voice cracking in half. His ears twitched at the name. A small sound escaped his throat. Not a bark, not a whine. Recognition. Behind them, someone gasped. Lena didn't look away. She traced the fur along his jaw, over the faint scar that hadn't been there before. Her other hand reached for the tagless collar, barely hanging from his neck. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. It had been over a decade since that meadow, since the walk no one wanted her to take, since they made her let him go. She should have known the bond wouldn't break just because they told it to. But she hadn't known he was still alive. She hadn't known he remembered. The Rangers lowered their weapons, unsure what they were witnessing. One of them whispered something about calling it in. Another just stared. Lena didn't hear them. All she saw was the dog who once laid beside her hospital bed through every fever, who growled when her IV was wrong, who knew her breathing patterns better than the machines ever did. She pressed her forehead against his, letting the weight of time fold. The forest didn't make a sound, and neither of them needed words. It started with a single photo. Someone, a ranger maybe, or one of the interns assigned to watch the ridge from afar, had snapped it just as the German shepherd lay down at Lena's feet. In the frame, you couldn't hear the silence that followed. You couldn't feel the way the air had changed, but you could see it, the posture of surrender, the unmistakable bond. A moment too intimate to explain and too strange to ignore. By noon the next day, it was everywhere. Wild beast tames himself for cancer survivor. Who is the mysterious dog of Ridge Valley? Behaviorist or handler? The secret past of Lena Avery. The headlines spun faster than truth could catch up. Lena sat in a dim office inside the sanctuary's administrative wing, a windowless room with a humming overhead light and a stack of non-disclosure forms that seemed to grow by the hour. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from media, emails from strangers, news alerts pinging like little landmines. They hadn't even released the dog's name. But it didn't matter. People had already given him one. The Sentinel. "Miss Avery," came the clipped voice of a man in a gray uniform, his nameplate reading Colburn. "Before we proceed, I need you to confirm. Have you had prior contact with this animal?" She met his gaze with the same quiet defiance that had once unnerved surgeons and psychologists alike. "I have." "When?" Lena leaned back, her voice steady. 12 years ago, in South Africa. My family found him abandoned during a safari tour. He stayed with us for over a year. Colburn glanced down at the file in his hand, thick with redacted lines and sealed stamps. "That animal," he said slowly, "was not just any military dog. He was part of a classified behavioral conditioning experiment under a program known as Project Sentinel. That operation was terminated 6 years ago." Lena frowned. Terminated? Disbanded, disavowed. The records were buried until today. He slid a document across the table. The photograph paperclip to the top showed Ragnar, leaner, younger, outfitted in military gear, eyes just as piercing. But his name wasn't Ragnar. Subject S-107, handler unknown. Lena's stomach dropped. "How did he end up in the wild?" she asked, voice smaller than before. "That's what we'd like to know." Colburn paused. "And frankly, the timing of your presence raises questions." Before she could respond, another official entered, a woman in civilian attire holding a printed sheet. "You might want to see this," she said, laying the paper down. Lena blinked. It was her, or rather her words, pulled from an old, nearly forgotten blog she'd started during her remission years. There was one guardian they never wrote about in my chart. He didn't wear a lab coat or monitor my vitals. But he knew when I couldn't sleep. He stayed at the door every night. He didn't ask for anything, just chose me, every single time. The title, The Guardian Who Chose Me. It had gone unnoticed for years, buried in a personal archive, until someone found it. "It's trending," the woman added. 78,000 shares in 3 hours. People are calling him a hero, a miracle. The government, however, she trailed off. Colburn scowled. The government sees a liability. Lena's fingers tightened in her lap. She could already feel the storm brewing, public sympathy clashing with official silence, the way institutions always scrambled when truth slipped through the cracks. "They're going to come for him, aren't they?" she asked quietly. "They're going to come for both of you." The sanctuary issued a temporary lockdown on the outer enclosures. Press vans lined the foothill roads. A drone was spotted circling the ridge before being brought down by wildlife protection. Ragnar, still quarantined in the protected recovery zone, paced the fence like he knew. Lena sat outside his enclosure as dusk bled into night, the sky bruised with orange and lavender. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just pressed his head against the wire until her hand touched the other side. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for them to find you." His amber eyes caught the fading light. He didn't need to say anything. The wind outside the cabin howled low, like a sound half-remembered from childhood dreams, soft, steady, almost like breathing. Inside, beneath the dim lamplight, Lena pulled a weathered storage box from under her bed and placed it gently on the table. The cardboard was frayed at the edges, marked with a single word in black ink, Ragnar. She hesitated before opening it, fingers tracing the letters like she was afraid they might vanish if she pressed too hard. Then, slowly, she lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of sketchbooks, spiral-bound, some with pages curled and warped by time, others with coffee rings or faint tear stains that bled the ink. She hadn't opened them in years, not since her final round of chemo. Not since that last winter in South Africa. The first sketch she pulled free was crude, just a child's drawing, uneven lines, too many teeth. But the eyes. Even then, she had gotten those right. Sharp, deep, watching, always watching. She smiled, the kind that hurt a little. "Do you remember this one?" she said aloud, though no one was there to answer. Or maybe someone was. She turned another page. A scene drawn entirely from memory. A young girl in a hospital bed, a large German shepherd curled beneath her feet like a shadow with fur. Another page Ragnar at the back of the truck as they crossed the Limpopo border, his head resting on her knee, her IV bag swinging gently in the corner of the sketch. Each page turned felt like opening a wound and finding a scar that never quite healed right. She reached for her old voice recorder, the same one she used during therapy. Clicked record. "My name is Lena Avery. I'm 22 years old. And this is the story of the dog who chose me when I didn't even know how to choose life." She paused. Let the words settle like dust. "His name is Ragnar, but back then I didn't know that. To me, he was just the dog with the broken paw, the one that didn't run when the other animals fled the engine noise. We found him near the edge of the preserve, limping and foaming at the mouth, eyes wild. My father told me not to get close, that he looked dangerous, but there was something in his stare that didn't match the rest of him, like he didn't want to be feared." She swallowed. Her hand brushed against a sketch of herself at 8 years old, bald, pale, but smiling, holding Ragnar's leash, both looking at something off the page. "I was so sick that year. The cancer had spread faster than anyone expected. The doctors called it a miracle trip, a final adventure, one last journey before we ran out of time. But time did something strange the moment we found him. It slowed down, changed shape. I stopped counting how many pills I took. I started counting the days I got to wake up and see him waiting by the door. She glanced toward the window where the moon hung low over the sanctuary's pines. Somewhere, not far, Ragnar lay in a holding pen alone, surrounded by fences and flashing camera drones. It didn't sit right. He wasn't just a dog, not to me. He was the reason I stopped asking when the end would come. He was the reason I believed in now, the reason I believed something could still choose me, even when I had nothing left to offer. Lena's voice cracked. She turned off the recorder. Silence crept in. Not heavy, not sharp, just present. She exhaled, long and slow, then reached for her backpack. From the bottom, beneath her field notebooks and GPS tracker, she pulled out a map, creased, marked in pen. It was the layout of the old southern range in South Africa, a place long sealed off by the Conservancy, the place where they first met, and where she last saw him before he disappeared. Her fingers trembled as she marked the same trail. "I'm going back," she whispered, not to find answers, but to remember the questions, the ones she had buried with her childhood, the ones only Ragnar had ever understood. The sun was just beginning to melt over the horizon when the safari truck slowed to a halt in the middle of the ridge plain. Golden light stretched long shadows across the dust, turning acacia trees into crooked silhouettes. Heat shimmered above the bonnet. Somewhere in the tall grass, cicadas screeched like old radio static. Lena Avery, just 8 years old and so pale her skin nearly mirrored the sky, pressed her nose to the open window. The oxygen tank next to her hissed gently. Her mother adjusted the nasal tube with careful fingers, eyes flicking toward the guide for reassurance. "We'll stop here for 15 minutes, the ranger announced in Afrikaans accented English. "Stretch your legs. Don't stray from the tracks." Lena stepped out slowly. The ground crunched beneath her soft-soled shoes. She didn't move like the other tourists. While others wandered with cameras, excited whispers and wide steps, Lena moved as if afraid the earth might reject her. Each movement was tentative, measured, as if life had already taught her not to rush toward it. Her father helped her down. "Just a quick breath, okay, Firefly?" She nodded. Firefly. That was what he always called her, because she was small, quiet, but somehow lit up the room even when everything else felt dark. But today she felt different, less tired, or maybe just curious. The tall grass behind the termite mound swayed unnaturally. A low sound, part growl, part cough, tickled her ears. "Dad?" she whispered. But he was busy asking the ranger something about giraffe migration. Her mother was pouring filtered water into a collapsible bowl for the dog that traveled with the camp. Another sound. Lena turned her head sharply. A shimmer of movement. She stepped off the worn path before she had time to think about the rules. The dry grass licked her ankles, and dust puffed from each step like powdered cinnamon. That's when she saw it. Not 10 feet away, hunched low near the base of a termite mound, lay a dog. No, not just any dog. A German shepherd, big, broad-shouldered, coat once sable, now matted with blood and ash. One paw curled under his body at a strange angle. A torn harness still clung to his flank. His ribs showed like the bones of an old shipwreck, and flies buzzed near his ear, but his eyes, His eyes were alive. They met hers, and the world tilted, not with fear, not even with surprise, but with something deeper, recognition, like he had been waiting. A low growl rumbled from his throat, but it wasn't threatening. It was pained, desperate. Lena crouched as far as her aching joints would allow. "Hi," she whispered. Her voice rasped like dry leaves. The dog didn't move. She reached into her cargo vest, fumbling past tissues and peppermints until she found a half-eaten protein bar. She unwrapped it with trembling fingers and laid it gently on the ground. He didn't lunge for it. He sniffed once, then looked back at her, still watching, like he was trying to decide if it was safe to hope. "Are you lost?" she asked, but the tears were already rising, because she knew what it meant to feel like that, like your body was a battlefield and every inch of strength was borrowed. He limped forward just once and collapsed again. Dust rose around him. He didn't bark, didn't whimper, just rested his head on the earth a few feet from her tiny knees. That's when she noticed the number branded under his fur. S07. It meant nothing to her then, but it would one day mean everything. "Lena!" Her mother's voice rang out, sharp with fear. The dog flinched. Lena turned and raised her hand. "I'm okay." Within moments, both parents arrived, frantic. Her father froze when he saw the dog. "Oh, God! That's not Lena! Step away from him!" "He's hurt," Lena said, eyes never leaving the shepherd. "He didn't try to bite me. He's just tired." The ranger raised his rifle. "That's a military dog harness. That's not one of ours." "Please don't shoot him," Lena said, panic rising in her chest like fire in dry grass. The dog looked up at her then. Not at the ranger. Not at the weapon. Just at her, as if his fate belonged to whatever she said next. Her mother stepped in. "She's right. He's not attacking. We should call the reserve's vet team." "There's a post downriver," the ranger muttered, "but he won't survive the night." Lena dropped to her knees, cradling the dog's paw as gently as a flower stem. "He made it this far," she whispered. "So will I." Her father crouched beside her, looked at the animal again, sighed the way only fathers sigh when they know they've already lost the argument. "All right, Firefly. Let's try." The veterinary station at the edge of the reserve was little more than a converted ranger hut walls lined with repurposed tools and the sharp scent of antiseptic cutting through the heat-soaked air. The ceiling fan spun slowly, ticking like a lazy clock in a place where time moved by survival, not schedules. Ragnar, though he didn't yet have that name, lay curled on a folded wool blanket on the floor. He hadn't moved much since the safari jeep rolled in. The ranger had warned them, "If he becomes aggressive, we can't risk keeping him." But he hadn't growled, hadn't snapped, hadn't even barked, only watched. Lena sat beside him now, cross-legged and careful, like approaching a storybook creature that might vanish if she moved too fast. Her oxygen tank stood next to her like a quiet sentinel. Her cheeks were flushed, not from sickness, but from something deeper. Wonder. She reached out slowly, and the dog's ears twitched. His body tensed for half a second, but when her fingers landed on his fur, he exhaled. She could feel his ribs through the coat. So thin, so tired, but solid. The vet, a tall man with copper skin and kind, searching eyes, knelt beside them. He wore a patchy safari vest, stethoscope slung loosely around his neck. "This dog," he said softly, "has seen war." Her mother looked up from the corner. "How do you know?" The vet parted the fur behind the dog's right ear gently. He looked at Lena. "Do you want to see something?" She nodded. The vet tilted the head gently, and there, faint but unmistakable, was a tattoo. Just a string of worn letters and numbers, burned into skin once shaved and now overgrown. SNTL-07. The vet exhaled. "Military issue. Likely experimental or special operations. These dogs, they're not just trained. They're programmed." Lena blinked. "Programmed?" "They're given commands most dogs wouldn't understand. Made to operate in chaos, under pressure, even without handlers. They're loyal to the death because they've been made that way." He paused. "Some say too loyal." Lena stared at the mark, her fingers hovering near it like it might burn her. Then, without asking, she touched it. The dog didn't flinch. His eyes flicked toward her, then closed, like he had been waiting for someone who wouldn't pull away. "He's not dangerous," she whispered. "He's just lost." Her father crossed his arms. "He could have rabies or internal injuries. We don't even know what he's been through." "I know," Lena said, still stroking the side of his neck. "But look at him. He's letting me touch him. He let me feed him." The vet nodded thoughtfully. "He has a collapsed paw, maybe an old fracture. He's dehydrated and bruised, but his vitals are holding. If we clean the wounds and keep him calm, he might recover." The room fell quiet again, the slow tick of the fan marking each second that passed like a heartbeat. Then came the question no one had yet asked aloud. "What do we do with him?" Lena answered without hesitation. "I want to name him Ragnar." Her parents both turned. "Ragnar?" her mother echoed. She nodded. "From the Viking stories. He fought through storms and betrayals, and even when he lost everything, he never gave up." Her father knelt beside her. His face was tired, worn from months of hospital rooms and test results that felt like cold verdicts. "You're sure?" She met his eyes. "I've never been more sure." Ragnar opened his eyes, as if understanding, as if the name had always been his. The vet smiled. "He'll need care, patience. He may have flashbacks, triggers, but I think he's bonded to her. That kind of connection, it's rare." Her mother exhaled. "We're not equipped." "We'll learn," Lena whispered. And for the first time in weeks, her voice wasn't weak. It carried something strong, something almost forgotten. Hope. The vet began dressing the wounds with practiced hands. Ragnar didn't make a sound, not a whimper, just watched the girl beside him every so often nudging her hand with his nose, like she was the anchor in a world that no longer made sense. And perhaps she was. As twilight bled through the wooden shutters, casting warm lines across the floor, Lena leaned her head against the dog's shoulder. The pain in her body still ached, but it felt quieter. Ragnar's breath matched hers. And in that stillness, where the dust had not yet settled from 1,000 battles neither of them fully understood, a silent trust was formed, unspoken, unbreakable. The low hum of a generator murmured behind the thatched walls of the wildlife veterinary outpost, barely audible beneath the mounting tension that filled the room. Shadows from the late afternoon sun stretched across the cracked cement floor, mingling with the smell of iodine and damp earth. Dr. Elena Miles stood by the exam table, latex gloves removed but still stained with traces of antiseptic. her brow furrowed, not from the complexity of Ragnar's wounds, but from the quiet war within her, between protocol and instinct. She was a woman who had spent 2 decades mending broken limbs, orphaned paws, bullet wounds, and once a leopard mauled by a poacher's trap. She had seen animals bite through steel cages out of fear. She had watched them trust no one, not even those who fed them. But this dog had allowed a frail little girl to rest her head on his neck. That didn't just happen. "Elena, please," Lena whispered, her voice softer than the cotton gauze between her fingers. She stood next to the low cot where Ragnar now rested, a thin IV line taped gently to his leg. "He needs a chance. He's not just any dog." Dr. Miles crossed her arms. Her dark hair, streaked with gray, was pulled into a haphazard bun. Her eyes were tired, sharp, skeptical. "Exactly, Lena. He's not just any dog. That tattoo? SNTL-07? That's military issue. I've seen a few over the years. Feral, abandoned, weaponized. Most never survive long. They're either unstable or put down. They're classified assets. They don't belong to anyone. And they don't forget." Lena didn't blink. "But he let me touch him. That doesn't mean he's safe. It means he chose not to be dangerous." That silenced the room for a moment. Ragnar stirred on the cot, his breath shallow but steady. His eyes flicked open, scanning the room once before locking onto Lena again. Not the vet, not the ranger standing outside, just her. He exhaled slowly. Dr. Miles looked at the girl again, barely 8 years old, her hospital wristband still loosely fastened, her thin frame wrapped in a cotton shawl that smelled faintly of antiseptic and eucalyptus. Lena had more scars than most grown men who'd been through war. And yet, here she stood, trying to save someone else's brokenness. Or perhaps trying to recognize her own. "You don't understand," Lena continued, her small voice like thread stitching through stone. "He didn't growl when I touched the scar. He didn't even move when they lifted him onto the truck. He only closed his eyes when I said his name." "You named him already?" Lena nodded. "Ragnar. It means warrior." The vet hesitated. "Dr. Miles," Lena's father interjected, standing near the door, arms folded tightly. "We understand the risks, but—" "She's right. I've seen him. He responds to her. She's the only one he responds to." Elena turned toward the father. "So what are you asking me to do? Hide a possibly dangerous animal in a medical facility that isn't certified for domestic cases? Keep a military dog off the record? If someone finds out, I could lose everything." "I'm not asking you to keep him," Lena said. "Just don't let him be taken away yet. Say he's under treatment, wounded, not fit for relocation." "Temporarily," her mother added quickly. "We're not suggesting you break the law. Only bend it a little." Dr. Miles leaned back against the metal cabinet, arms crossed again, her gaze fixed on the animal who now slept beside the girl like some mythic creature called forth by whispered prayer. She exhaled, slow, thoughtful. "I'll need to update his records manually," she murmured, half to herself. "Remove the tattoo from the log. Label him as an unclaimed rescue. No microchip. Off-grid." Lena's eyes lit up, but she stayed quiet. Dr. Miles walked over to the table, kneeling beside Ragnar. She looked at the way his body tensed, not in fear, but readiness. His muscles were lean but wasted, like a soldier who hadn't eaten in days but still watched the door. And yet, when her hand brushed his fur, he didn't flinch. She turned to Lena. "If he so much as growls at anyone, he's gone." Lena nodded quickly. "You feed him. You walk him. He sleeps here under observation. You earn his trust every day. If I sense he's regressing, he gets reported. Understand?" "I do," Lena whispered. "And don't write about this in one of your little journals." "I won't." A pause. Then, "You already have, haven't you?" Lena offered a sheepish smile. Dr. Miles smirked, her sternness cracking just enough to let something else through. Reluctant affection. She turned to the computer, pulled up the intake form, and typed one sentence that would change everything. Injury case. Subject unnamed. Awaiting recovery review. And just like that, Ragnar became something else. Not a weapon, not a stray. He became a possibility. Lena stood beside him until the sun dropped below the horizon, until the world outside turned to silhouette and ash. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't the one being saved. She was the one doing the saving. The hospital smelled like bleach and waiting. Lena's room was tucked in the farthest corner of the pediatric oncology wing room 214, a narrow space with pale green walls and a view that barely caught the Colorado sunset. Machines beeped rhythmically beside her bed like tired metronomes. Her IV pole stood like a silent sentinel, cords tangled like weary vines feeding her fragile body. She had lost more weight. Her skin was papery. Her lips, often too dry to part without cracking, whispered silent things at night that only one being ever understood. And every Thursday afternoon, when the light hit just right, he came. Ragnar. The nurses never questioned it anymore. At first there were raised eyebrows, clipboard debates, layers of red tape. But Dr. Miles had signed the clearance. The hospital's director, after seeing the psychological improvement in Lena's vitals, had quietly endorsed the weekly visits under a special therapy clause. And so, once a week, a retired military K-9 walked down the pediatric wing, leash held by no one, guided by something far older than commands. He would pause at every doorway, sniffing, listening, until he reached hers. And then, like ritual, he would nudge the door open with his snout and pad across the linoleum floor, silent, solemn, unwavering. He never barked, never whimpered, never wagged. He simply climbed up beside the bed, careful not to touch the cords or the bruises, and lay down, spine to spine, heart to heartbeat. Lena would stir. Sometimes she was sleeping, sometimes she wasn't. But the moment his breath touched her shoulder, her fingers would find his fur, like a blind girl reaching for the familiar curve of light. "Hi," she would whisper, voice like fog. Ragnar would close his eyes, and the night would begin. That first night she'd vomited 3 times from the chemo. Her body trembled from the transfusion, cold blood poured into warm veins, and she'd cried without sound, her chest heaving, but throat too raw to scream. Ragnar didn't move. He stayed on the bed, pressed against her back, matching her breath when it faltered, leaning into her weight when she thought she'd vanish. There was something ancient about his stillness, not passive, but protective. As if every breath he took was in service of hers. As if he had been trained for this and only this, to wait with her through the unbearable. One evening, a new nurse entered the room, clipboard clutched like a shield. "No animals past 8 p.m., she said flatly, eyeing Ragnar with the disdain of someone who had never needed quiet company. Lena didn't speak. She simply turned her face into Ragnar's shoulder, shaking with silent sobs, and the dog lifted his head, eyes narrowed, but calm. He didn't growl, didn't bare teeth, but his gaze was enough. The nurse froze, and then slowly backed out. No one questioned it again. They developed their own language, those two. Sometimes Lena would tap her fingers against the mattress in patterns, 3 slow, 2 fast, and Ragnar would tilt his head. Other times she would mumble stories through cracked lips, half memories, half dreams, and he would listen as if each syllable was a directive. When the pain was too much, she would bury her face in the warm crook of his chest and cry until sleep took her. And when night terrors came, when her body writhed, eyes wide and limbs flailing, it was Ragnar's nose against her cheek that pulled her back. She never screamed when he was there. One night, during a blood transfusion that went wrong, alarms blared. Her parents weren't in the room. The nurse had stepped away. And Lena began to seize. Her limbs jerked, her mouth foamed. The machine beeped frantically, but no one came. Except Ragnar. He leapt from the bed, slammed both paws onto the emergency call button, and howled, not in fear, but command. The kind of sound that echoed from desert war zones and blackout missions. That howl belonged to something trained to protect, even when forgotten. Within seconds, staff rushed in. But even as they worked, Ragnar remained pressed against her arm, his body anchoring hers. A week later, her parents placed a photo on her bedside table. It showed Ragnar curled around her tiny, frail form, both fast asleep. The caption, written in her father's handwriting, read, "The one who keeps her breathing." By the 3rd month of visits, the nurses had begun bringing Ragnar small treats. One even knitted him a soft scarf to wear in winter. The scarf was navy blue, stitched with a single word in white yarn, "Guardian." And in the hush between beeping machines, in the stillness of midnight saline drips, they existed not as patient and therapy dog, but as something else entirely. As two broken creatures choosing to heal side by side. She, a girl learning to fight. He, a soldier learning how to stay. The idea came to Lena during one of those long half-lit afternoons when time lost its shape. Outside, snow was falling, the heavy kind that silenced cities and erased footprints before they could become memories. Inside room 214, the air was thick with antiseptic and stories unsaid. Ragnar lay curled at the foot of the bed, his body rising and falling like a tide she had learned to trust more than her own pulse. Her fingers, frail but determined, clutched a needle. Each stitch was uneven, some tight, some trembling. But all of them meant something. The fabric she worked on wasn't from a craft kit or gift shop. It was made from scraps. Her father's old flannel shirt, a faded hospital gown, the corner of a scarf Ragnar had chewed as a pup, and a patch of sun-bleached canvas that used to hang over their tent in Namibia. This was no ordinary blanket. This was a map, a history, a promise. In the center of it, she had sewn a square of ivory felt, and on that square, in thread the color of winter dusk, she embroidered his name, Ragnar. Below it, carefully traced with help from the nurse and sealed with warm ink, was his paw print. Large, imperfect, eternal. She stared at it for a long time, her breathing shallow but steady. Then she whispered into the stillness, "If he stays alive, so will I." No one told her to say it. No doctor had instructed her to make a pact with a creature that couldn't speak back. But in her child's heart, tempered by poisoned drips and whispered prayers, Lena believed in things grown-ups had long abandoned, silent magic, quiet faith, and the wild loyalty of those who cannot lie. Ragnar lifted his head. His eyes met hers. and for a second, just a second, the line between animal and angel blurred. That night, she slept with the blanket pulled all the way to her chin, his paw resting on top of it. The nurses noticed something strange the next morning. Her vitals, erratic for weeks, had begun to stabilize. Her oxygen intake was stronger. White blood cells crept upward. And for the first time in months, Lena asked for solid food. Dr. Miles stared at the chart, then at the girl. "It doesn't make sense medically," she murmured to the head nurse. "But emotionally, it makes all the sense in the world." From that day on, the blanket never left her side. It went with her to blood tests, to radiation, to whispered conversations about things children should never have to understand. And through it all, every shaky breath, every needle prick, every silent plea, Ragnar was there. More than once, a staff member would enter and find Lena with the blanket wrapped around both of them. A girl and her dog stitched into each other's survival. Weeks passed, the snow melted, and the prognosis, once whispered in warnings, began to shift. "She's a fighter," the doctors said. But Lena knew better. She wasn't fighting alone. She had made a pact, and the paw sewn into the heart of that blanket was more than a print. It was an anchor, a vow, a heartbeat stitched into fabric. One evening, as she drifted off under the dim hospital lamp, she pulled the blanket tighter, her voice thin but certain. "If you don't leave me, I promise I won't leave either." Ragnar's ears twitched, and in the hush of the room he pressed his head against her chest, right above her heart. The hospital had its routines, beeping monitors, nurses' clipped footsteps, and the low hum of machinery trying to hold time in place. It was a Sunday afternoon. Soft light pooled across the linoleum floor of room 214, where Lena lay resting. Her cheeks had a hint of color again, and her hair, though patchy, had begun to grow back in delicate tufts. At her bedside, Ragnar dozed with his chin on his paws, the blanket they shared covering the edge of the bed and trailing down like a bridge between two worlds. Then the door creaked open. A new nurse entered, young, hurried, apologetic. She glanced at the chart, muttered something about an adjustment, and replaced the IV bag hanging beside Lena's bed. "Just saline and magnesium," she explained, mostly to herself. Lena barely stirred. The room returned to quiet, but Ragnar, he didn't. At first, it was subtle. His ears twitched. His eyes snapped open. Then came the growl. Low, primal, resonant. A sound Lena had never heard from him before. It wasn't aggression. It was warning. The nurse froze. Ragnar's body tensed, rising halfway to a crouch. His nose lifted, nostrils flaring as if reading the air itself. Then, without hesitation, he let out a full-throated bark, sharp and urgent. Lena's eyes fluttered open just as her arm twitched violently. She gasped, her lips paled, and then her throat closed. Alarms exploded as Lena's monitors spiked. Ragnar barked again, louder now, desperation bleeding through instinct. Doctors rushed in. A crash cart screeched into the room. One nurse yanked the IV line from her arm while another administered epinephrine. "Anaphylactic shock," someone shouted. "Check the IV, was it saline or—" They didn't finish the sentence. The bag lay on the ground, label torn, contents unknown. 10 minutes passed like a war. Lena's chest heaved once, twice, then air returned. Color slowly crept back into her lips. Only then did Ragnar step back, his fur still raised, gaze fixed on the bag as if it were an enemy he couldn't bite. Later, in the quiet hum of aftershock, Dr. Elena Miles entered with trembling hands. "If he hadn't warned us," she whispered, staring at the dog, not with awe, but with respect. Ragnar sat beside Lena's bed, eyes never leaving her face. He didn't seek praise, didn't need it. His purpose was clear. He wasn't just there to comfort her. He was there to guard her. News of the incident spread quickly among staff, among administrators. The question arose, how did the dog know? No scent marker, no prior training documented for allergen detection, just a growl, just a moment, just enough time to save her life. That night, Lena scribbled into her notebook with a shaking hand. Some hearts beat louder in silence. He warned them before I could even feel it. He knew. He always knows. She reached out and placed her palm over Ragnar's paw, the same one stitched into the blanket beside her. "You're not just my friend, are you?" she whispered. "You're the reason I'm still here." Ragnar didn't blink. He didn't need to. Some things are answered just by staying. It began as a tremble. The moon had cast a silver hue across Lena's bedroom floor, slipping past curtains she'd left open intentionally for him. Ragnar lay curled near her bed, the blanket with his paw print folded over his side like a shield. At first glance he was calm, breathing slow and steady. But the tremble betrayed him. Lena stirred. She blinked at the shadows dancing on the walls, unsure if the sound had come from her own dream or from the room itself. Then it came again. A low, guttural whimper. Ragnar's legs twitched violently. His paws moved as if running away or toward she couldn't tell. His jaw tensed. A small, muffled growl slipped through his teeth. Then came the sound that made her blood turn to ice. A howl, long, distant, full of anguish, not like wolves do under the moon, but like something remembering pain calling to something lost. Lena sat up instantly. "Ragnar?" She reached down to touch him gently. He didn't wake. His eyes fluttered beneath their lids, breath hitching, body trembling in waves. It wasn't just a dream. It was a memory. One he couldn't speak of, but couldn't escape either. By the time the episode passed, Ragnar was panting hard, eyes wide open but unfocused. When he finally looked at her, he looked through her, like he was still somewhere else. Somewhere far from this room. Somewhere darker. She whispered, calming words flowing like a lullaby. "You're safe. It's over. You're not there anymore." Ragnar licked her hand absently. But his tail didn't wag. That silence hurt more than any growl could. The next morning, Lena sat on the edge of her bed, holding her phone. She'd recorded the howl accidentally at first. It wasn't something she planned to share, but now she wasn't so sure. She hesitated, then pressed send. The audio file traveled to Dr. Elena Miles with a single line of text. "He's not okay." Dr. Miles called within the hour. "Play it for me again," she asked, voice heavy with concern. The vet listened in silence. On the second replay, she exhaled slowly. "I've heard cries like that before. In military dogs who've seen too much. It's not a dream. It's a flashback." Lena swallowed hard. "PTSD? Most likely. The limb tremors, the vocalization, the detached gaze afterward. All of it lines up." There was a pause on the line. "Lena, it's possible this wasn't just a stray dog who found you. Dogs like him don't end up in the wild by accident. Something broke him, and he survived it." That night, as twilight settled in again, Lena unrolled an old sketchpad. She flipped past pages of childlike drawings until she found one that made her stop. It was a charcoal sketch of Ragnar curled beside her hospital bed. But there, in the corner, she had scrawled something in a looping 8-year-old's handwriting. "He hears things I can't. He sees things I don't." She ran her fingers over the words, then looked at the dog curled again by her side. "What did they do to you, boy?" she whispered. "What are you still running from?" Outside, an owl hooted somewhere in the distance. Inside, the room felt smaller, quieter, but not calmer. Not when something this loyal carried wounds so deep. The morning sun spilled gold across the back porch as Lena stepped into the coolness of the barn. Dust motes drifted in columns of light, suspended like memories in midair. She was reaching for a box of feed when a low huff stopped her cold. Ragnar stood rigid just outside the barn door, ears pinned forward, eyes sharp-focused. Lena followed his gaze. There, coiled in the shadow near a hay bale, was a rattlesnake. Its tail buzzed like a warning trapped in time. Lena froze, but Ragnar didn't move, not an inch. Instead, he slowly turned his head to her, then shifted his body to block the barn's entrance. No growl, no bark, just intent, deliberate, controlled. And then, without turning his back on the snake, he raised one paw, hovered it, waited, as if waiting for a command. "Ragnar," she whispered, heart pounding. He didn't glance back, just kept that paw lifted. Then, slowly, almost surgically, he moved in a tight arc. His body curved to flank the predator, never lunging, never snapping. A soft snort and a stomp with his front paw. The snake reared, then hissed, and slithered away, retreating beneath the fence into the brush. It was over in less than a minute, but the precision, the intent left Lena breathless. Later, after the adrenaline drained, she knelt in front of him. Ragnar sat calmly, tail sweeping the floor behind him, gaze steady. "No one taught you that. At least, not us." She lifted her hand, paused, then gave a short open palm signal. Without hesitation, Ragnar sat. She blinked. Another signal-closed fist, lowered to the chest. He lay down. "Oh my God." The realization hit like a memory surfacing too fast. These weren't tricks he picked up watching others. These were commands. Tactical, purposeful. He'd been trained, and not by ordinary hands. Over the next days, Lena experimented tentatively, then with increasing clarity. She found herself using gestures from an old book she'd read as a child military K9 hand signs. "Every time," Ragnar responded flawlessly. "Signal to search?" He swept the area with methodical patience. "Signal to hold?" He froze in place, unmoving until released. Even when she whispered, "Danger," with her hand tucked against her leg, he lowered his body into a defensive crouch, eyes scanning like radar. It wasn't obedience. It was instinct. Somewhere, deep inside that scarred mind, a part of him remembered, and that part was waking up. That evening, Lena sat cross-legged near the barn, Ragnar stretched beside her, chin on her ankle like an anchor. The wind rustled the tall grass around them. She stared into the horizon but spoke softly to him. "Someone made you into something lethal, and now you're trying to be soft again. Gentle." Ragnar nudged her hand with his nose, eyes asking questions she wasn't sure how to answer. "Who trained you? Why were you left behind?" She reached for the old blanket she always carried on chilly nights, the one with his paw print stitched into the corner, and wrapped it over both of them. "You're not just remembering commands, are you?" she whispered. "You're remembering who you were." Later that night, she wrote in her journal, "He doesn't bark at threats. He identifies, contains, neutralizes, like he was born to protect. But it's more than training, it's muscle memory. He's moving like someone programmed him to be a ghost. Silent, efficient, kind, but dangerous." At the bottom of the page, she scribbled one final thought. "We don't speak the same language, and yet we understand each other better than most people ever could." The knock came just before noon. Not urgent, not hesitant, just practiced. Lena looked up from the porch swing where she was sketching Ragnar asleep at her feet. Her mother, Rachel, stepped out with a dish towel still in her hands, squinting at the silhouette framed by the dust and sunlight at the gate. A man in uniform. Not active duty, but not just anyone. He wore desert boots, khakis, and a patched jacket with a faded insignia, a stylized dog's head inside a ring of stars. There was a stiffness to his posture, one that didn't come from discomfort, but from decades of drilled precision. He didn't smile, but he did remove his cap when Rachel approached. "Mrs. McCrae, my name is Owen Beckett. I'm a retired K-9 handler with Joint Tactical Response. May I speak with you and your daughter?" Rachel's expression froze somewhere between maternal defense and cautious hospitality. "This about the blog?" she asked. Beckett nodded once. "It's about the dog." They sat around the kitchen table. Beckett didn't touch the water offered. His eyes moved constantly, but not nervously, strategically, logging every detail. Ragnar lay near the fridge, quiet, alert, but his ears had tilted back the moment Beckett entered, just slightly, as if something registered. Beckett noticed. "He remembers," the man said quietly. "They always do." Lena leaned forward, hands clasped tight. "You know him? You know who he is?" The retired handler exhaled, slow and heavy, as if carrying the weight of something long buried. "We called him Kilo 7. He was deployed as part of Project Sentinel, a specialized K-9 unit built for deep recon and asset extraction. No leashes, no barks, just hand signals, biometric pairing, and an uncanny ability to detect irregularities before we did." He looked down at Ragnar with something between reverence and grief. "He was the best. Vanished during an operation 3 years ago in North Africa. We presumed him dead." Lena's voice cracked as it emerged. "He saved me. Over and over." Beckett's jaw tensed. His eyes flicked to Rachel, then back to Lena. "I believe you. But here's the part you need to understand." He pulled a weathered folder from his jacket, nothing marked classified, but thick with intent. "This dog still carries a federal tag, even if it was scrubbed from public systems. And your blog, it reached some people who don't like loose ends." Rachel's shoulders stiffened. "Are you here to take him?" "No," Beckett said gently. "But someone else might be. Unless he's registered legally as a civilian support animal, he's still government property. You have a window, a narrow one, to make this official." Lena stared at him, heart pounding, eyes stinging. "You called him Kilo 7, but to me he's Ragnar. He chose me." Beckett finally let a faint, almost imperceptible smile crease the edge of his face. "Then hold on to that. But protect him the way he protected you. Paperwork, tags, signatures. Because the ones coming next won't care what he means to you." After Beckett left, silence settled like fog. Lena sat on the porch steps beside Ragnar, who leaned his head into her ribs, anchoring her, as he always did. She whispered through clenched teeth, I won't let them take you. I won't." She reached for the braided cord on her wrist, Ragnar's first collar, now worn smooth by time, and squeezed it like a vow. Inside, her mother was already on the phone, asking for forms. Because in a world where silent dogs carried secrets and governments forgot their own soldiers, it would take more than love to keep a protector safe. It would take action. And Lena was done being passive. It began with muffled voices behind a closed door. But even muffled, the weight of certain words finds its way through walls. Lena paused halfway down the hallway, barefoot, holding a cup of water she'd meant to bring to her nightstand. The cup trembled slightly in her hand, not because it was heavy, but because of what her ears were starting to register. "It's not safe, Rachel," her father's voice, measured, low, like he didn't want to be overheard, but edged with frustration that had been fermenting quietly. "He's a trained military dog. We don't know what he's capable of. What if he snaps one night? What if something inside him breaks?" There was a pause. Then her mother, defensive, but tired. "And what if something inside Lena breaks because you take him away?" A beat of silence. Then, "You saw the military file, Evan. Classified missions. Combat trauma." They said words like implanted response cycles. That he's not like other dogs. That some triggers we don't even know about could make him... Her father didn't finish the sentence, but the air in the hallway filled it in. Lena stepped back, heart hammering against her ribs like a warning drum. She heard her mother again, this time softer. "He's never once hurt her. He senses her, guards her. I've seen it with my own eyes. You have too. Rachel, you know I love her. I would burn the world to keep her alive. But loving her doesn't mean we keep playing house with a bomb in the living room." That was when the glass in Lena's hand slipped and shattered at her feet. The conversation stopped instantly. The door creaked open, revealing her parents frozen mid-argument, her father's hands still gesturing, her mother with tear-bright eyes. Lena didn't flinch at the broken glass, didn't even glance down. She looked only at them, and her voice, when it came, was quieter than the shatter, but far sharper. "He's not a bomb." They sat her down at the kitchen table. Ragnar padded in silently, tail swaying low, sensing the tension but staying by her side as always. Her father knelt to sweep up the glass. Her mother brought another glass of water, but no one spoke. So Lena did. "You're scared of him because of what he was, but you never once asked what he's become." Her voice was trembling now, not with weakness but the effort of holding in a storm. "He warned the nurses when they gave me the wrong IV. He pulled me out of bed when I almost fell during chemo. He sleeps by my feet even when he's hurting. He doesn't bark. He doesn't beg. He waits. For me. Like I'm the only reason he's still breathing." Ragnar sat beside her now, unmoving, his gaze fixed on her father as if waiting for judgment. "If you take him away," Lena continued, barely above a whisper, "you might as well take my lungs." Her mother wiped her eyes. Her father looked at Ragnar again. At the dog who didn't growl, didn't bare teeth, just watched. Steady, waiting. "I know what trauma looks like," Evan said finally, voice softer. "I've seen it in soldiers, in children, in myself. And I know what happens when we pretend love is enough to erase it." Lena nodded slowly. "Love doesn't erase it," she said, "but it gives it somewhere to go." There was silence again, the kind that isn't empty, but full of reckonings, of truths that couldn't be unspoken. Then her mother spoke, voice gentle but firm. "We won't make this decision tonight." Evan hesitated, then gave a slow, reluctant nod. Okay, but we talk to Dr. Miles. We document everything. We stay alert. Lena looked at Ragnar, who rested his head gently on her knee as if to say, I'm not going anywhere. Neither was she. The meadow had always felt like a secret between them. It was where wild grasses brushed her knees and the sky seemed to stretch a little wider, as if making space for her breath when her lungs forgot how to draw it. A place where Ragnar didn't limp and Lena didn't wince, where disease and memory didn't press so heavy. Today, the sky was overcast, but warm. The air carried that soft weight of oncoming rain, thick, quiet, forgiving. Lena stood at the gate, sweater too big for her shoulders, a scarf trailing down her back like a ribbon of color against her pale frame. She held the leash loosely in her hand, though she never needed it. Ragnar walked beside her without command, like he always had. His steps were slower now, just slightly. His wound had healed, but something in his bones remembered the pain. Still, he moved with the dignity of a soldier and the gentleness of a friend. They walked side by side through the meadow path, silence between them, but not the kind that needs to be filled, the kind that listens. Birds darted overhead, their wings slicing the stillness. Somewhere in the tall reeds, a cricket began its hesitant song. About halfway down the trail, Lena reached into her pocket, searching for her inhaler. Her breath had started to hitch, barely a flutter in the chest, more nerves than illness. But her pocket was empty. Before she could panic, Ragnar had already turned. He sniffed her jacket, paused, then gently nudged the flap of her backpack with his nose. When she didn't move fast enough, he pawed it once. She unzipped it, and there it was, her inhaler. She stared at him, blinking. A small, shaky laugh escaped her lips. "Of course you remembered," she whispered, "even when I didn't." Ragnar gave a soft grunt, tail flicking once, then resumed his place at her side. They reached the clearing, the one with the leaning tree and the patch of clover that always grew in the shape of a heart. Lena sat in the grass, legs folded, head tilted back to look at the clouds. Ragnar settled next to her, his body curved in a protective crescent. "They think you're dangerous," she said softly, "that you're a risk. But they don't see what I see." She ran a hand through his fur just behind his ear, where the tattoo had faded into skin and memory. He leaned into her touch. "You were born to protect," she continued, "not to be protected." Her voice broke on the last word. She bit her lip hard, trying not to cry, but it was there, in the corners of her eyes and the tremble in her shoulders. Ragnar didn't move. He just pressed his head against her chest, a silent anchor. Time passed, like the breeze, slow, invisible, steady. Then, as the first drop of rain touched her cheek, Lena stood. Ragnar rose too. They didn't speak again. Didn't need to. They walked the rest of the trail in that same gentle silence, girl and dog, side by side, step for step, breath for breath. A last walk, not of farewell, but of promise. That even if things changed, this meadow, this feeling, would live on in both of them. The gravel road wound upward like an uncertain promise, cutting through pine-scented silence and golden fields that swayed under a drowsy sun. The sign at the entrance was modest aged wood, hand-painted letters, Ridge Valley Preserve, a sanctuary for the forgotten brave. No barbed wire, no chains, just open land and the hush of wind brushing over old ghosts. In the back seat, Ragnar sat upright, unmoving. The wind from the half-cracked window ruffled the fur around his neck, but he didn't chase it like he used to. His ears twitched at distant calls, some primal instinct waking up, tugging at something deep in his bones. Lena pressed her palm flat to the glass between them, her breath fogging it slightly. Her other hand clutched the paw-print blanket she'd made creased at the corners, soft with overuse. No one spoke in the car. Even the tires seemed to roll quieter today. When they pulled into the clearing, Dr. Miles was already waiting near the gate clipboard in hand, face tight with the weight of things unsaid. Beside her stood a tall man with a silver beard and sunburnt skin, Ranger Holt, the caretaker of Ridge Valley, a man who had served with dogs like Ragnar and never quite left the field. The back door opened. Ragnar stepped out slowly, sniffed the earth, looked toward the line of trees swaying at the edge of the preserve. He didn't bolt. He didn't bark. Just stood there, watchful, composed, like he understood. Lena knelt beside him. No leash, no collar, just her trembling fingers tracing the fur between his shoulders. "You don't have to look back," she whispered, "but I hope you do." He turned to her, finally, those amber eyes soft but steady. And for one impossible moment, the entire world narrowed to the space between her hand and his heart. Every hospital night, every shared silence, every unspoken promise. Then Ragnar stepped back, one pace, then two. He looked over his shoulder once, long enough. And then, without a sound, he slipped into the tall grass, his body dissolving into the green and gold until only the hush remained. No chains rattled, no gates clanged shut, only the rustle of leaves and a girl standing with her hand still in the air, trying not to let it shake. "Goodbye, Protector," her father murmured beside her, his voice thick. "Thank you." But Lena didn't answer. She couldn't, because some goodbyes weren't meant to be spoken out loud. They were meant to be walked, step by step, and left gently in the wind. The dorm room was sparse, not out of necessity but choice. One bed, one desk. No posters, no stuffed animals. Just a faded paw-print blanket folded at the foot of the bed, like a memory too sacred to be disturbed. Lena was 20 now. Her hair had grown long again, her once fragile frame steadied by years of recovery. But she still walked like someone listening to ghosts, quiet, deliberate, present in rooms that weren't hers. Her roommate had moved out weeks ago, said the silence was too loud. Lena didn't mind. Each evening after lectures, she sat at her desk beneath the yellowish halo of a flickering desk lamp, scrolling through old declassified reports, archived journals, case notes buried in dusty corners of forgotten databases. Her major was psychology, but her heart belonged to something narrower, something only she seemed to be chasing. Post-service behavioral patterns in retired K-9 units. The screen glowed with entries marked redacted, unclaimed, presumed decommissioned. Dogs listed by ID numbers, not names. Fragments of lives that had once tracked bombs, saved children, served in silence, forgotten when their noses dulled or their reactions slowed. She read them all. One entry described a German shepherd who froze at the sound of hydraulic doors. Another noted a subject who only ate in total darkness. Another, a dog who growled seconds before his handler experienced an unexpected seizure. She paused at that one, highlighted it, annotated in the margins. Matching behavior, Ragnar, IV alert, 2017. Her fingers trembled slightly on the trackpad. She'd never said his name out loud again. Not after Ridge Valley. Never adopted another animal. Couldn't. It wasn't grief, it was fidelity to a bond that never got a clean ending. Sometimes her professors questioned the emotional distance in her presentations. "Your writing is clinical, Lena, but there's something under it. You're too close to be this detached." They weren't wrong, because she didn't write about Ragnar. She wrote around him. In the middle drawer of her desk, beneath old lab reports and half-filled journals, was a small drive encrypted, never labeled. It held videos, photos, and audio logs from those hospital nights, recordings of Ragnar laying by her bed, the faint rhythm of his breathing matching hers, his ears twitching in dreams. She never played them, just needed them there. A kind of quiet pact, a reminder. Outside her window, fall had begun bleeding into early winter. Leaves scattered across the campus lawn like stories never told, all the way to the end. Students passed with headphones in, laughter trailing behind them. But inside her room, only the tapping of keys echoed. Tap, pause, tap. She opened a new document and typed the words slowly. "Some ghosts don't haunt, they guard. They don't rattle chains, they wait. And sometimes you don't need a leash to know you've been chosen. You just know." She saved the file without naming it, closed the laptop, and for the first time in weeks, unfolded the paw print blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders, not for warmth but for memory. That night, she dreamed of tall grass and amber eyes that never looked away. It began with a single sentence. His name was Ragnar. He never said a word, but he saved me louder than anyone ever could. Lena stared at it for a long time before clicking publish. The blog had been dormant for years, just a few old posts about medical advocacy and a quiet girl's musings on hospital food. But tonight it carried something heavier, a eulogy that wasn't about death, but the kind of living that only happens when someone else carries your weight. She called it Guardian of the Quiet Bond. There were no photos of him, just a hand-drawn image she'd sketched from memory. The curve of his ears, that faint scar under one eye, and eyes that always looked like they were listening even when nothing was said. The post didn't try to explain everything, just enough. He wasn't a pet. Not really. He was a soldier, I think. One who had seen things he couldn't forget, but still chose to sit beside a sick girl and never leave her side. I don't know who trained him. I don't know what wars he survived, but I know this. When I was too weak to fight, he guarded my silence like it was sacred. And somehow, that healed something doctors couldn't. She closed the browser. Didn't check it again for 2 days. When she finally opened it, the post had already been shared over 300,000 times. The comments section was a quiet flood. "I had a dog like this in Iraq, never barked once, slept outside my tent every night, at K9 Viet Unit 423. My son has autism. Your story made me cry. His service dog does the same thing, sits with him in silence, never demands anything back. At Mama's 4 PTSD. I train retired K9s. What you describe, that's muscle memory. Those silent hand signals. He was remembering who he used to be, but choosing you instead. That's not obedience. That's love." At Delta Handlers, ASOC. Some sent artwork, others sent stories, and some simply typed, "Thank you for seeing them, for telling it right." Within a week, a trauma clinic reached out, then a journalist, then a veterans outreach program asking permission to reprint it in their newsletter. But Lena didn't write it for them. She wrote it because some memories aren't meant to be kept in drawers or encrypted drives. Some memories deserve air, and space and witness, and in sharing his silence she found her voice. That night, as rain traced soft fingers across her window pane, Lena opened a fresh page in her notebook and wrote only one thing at the top. The quiet ones remember everything. It was the kind of call that didn't need to say much. Lena was sorting laundry when her phone buzzed. Unknown number, area code she didn't recognize. She almost let it ring out, but something made her swipe it. Hello? There was a pause on the other end, then a voice she hadn't heard in nearly a decade. Lena? She froze. The scent of detergent, the hum of her dorm fridge, all of it faded. This is Elena Miles, from the preserve now. Ridge Valley. Her throat tightened. Is everything okay? Dr. Miles exhaled. The kind of exhale that came with heavy hands and heavier decisions. He hasn't eaten in days. The silence between them stretched like dusk. He's still strong, Elena added, almost apologetically. Still walks the perimeter, still scans the wind like he's on patrol. But he doesn't connect anymore. He just stares north, stiff, waiting. Lena's grip on the phone slackened. Her fingers trembled as they found the edge of the folded blanket on her bed, the one she hadn't used in years. The blanket with the faded embroidery and a paw print stitched beside her name. What direction is north from Ridge? Toward the open ridges, empty plains. No structures, no humans. A pause. But maybe not no one. Lena shut her eyes. All these years she thought she had let him go, told herself it was mercy, that he deserved to be free, not tied to a girl with a past diagnosis and a present full of papers and deadlines. But some bonds didn't break. They just waited. Do you want me to come? She asked quietly. There was no hesitation. I think you're the only one he still believes might come back. The air at Ridge Valley Preserve carried a different weight, thinner, cleaner, but edged with the quiet ache of lives that had seen too much. Lena stepped through the front gate slowly, her boots sinking slightly into the dusty path. She hadn't been here since high school. The trees were taller now, the outer fences reinforced. But the silence, it was the same. Not empty, but watching. Dr. Miles was waiting just past the paddock. He's by the north field, she said softly, walking beside Lena. He doesn't let the others come close. Lena nodded but didn't reply. Her hands were clenched in her coat pockets, not from the cold, but from the flood of things she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Not in college, not in the years that followed, not even when she stitched the final words of her blog post about him and cried into her keyboard. They reached the edge of the field. At first she didn't recognize him. The dog standing alone beneath a wind-bent pine was a stranger carved from time. His coat was coarser, streaked with ash gray and pale scars that mapped stories she'd never know. His left ear drooped now. There was a slight limp in his stance. And yet, the way he scanned the horizon, body taut like wire, he hadn't surrendered his purpose. "Ragnar," she whispered. It wasn't loud, but the sound cut through the field like a note struck on bone. The dog turned. And his eyes, those eyes found her. Not just saw her, found her. Something primal flickered in them, like a soldier waking mid-dream. He took one step, hesitant, then another, quicker. Then he was moving, sprinting, his body aching to remember youth, to collapse distance, to cross the chasm time had built. Lena fell to her knees in the dust. "Hey," she breathed, tears cutting silent streaks down her face. "You waited." Ragnar didn't bark, didn't whimper. He simply rested his forehead against hers and stood there, trembling but upright, as if anchoring them both back to a truth neither had ever stopped believing. They were not done, not yet. The midday sun stretched long shadows across the enclosed glade near the north fence, where pine needles blanketed the ground in soft hushes. Lena stood 10 feet away from Ragnar. No leash, no spoken word, just the space between them, thick with memory. She raised her right hand slowly, fingers flat, palm angled forward. He didn't move. Not right away. A second passed. Then 2. His ears twitched. One paw lifted halfway, suspended. Then he dropped into a low crouch, perfectly still, like breath before thunder. Lena blinked through tears she didn't know had formed. She gave another silent command, 2 fingers pointed left. Ragnar bolted across the clearing in an arc, stopped precisely at the marked spot where no mark existed, and turned back to her, awaiting the next cue. Chest heaving, eyes locked, eager but calm. The kind of calm that only came from training deeper than obedience born of trust. She couldn't speak. She tried. Instead, she simply lowered to her knees, hands resting in her lap, open. He approached slowly, like he'd done 1,000 times before, on fields stained with things children shouldn't see, during nights when nightmares clung like sweat. He walked forward with the dignity of something ancient, something honorable. He placed his head gently in her lap. Lena's breath broke. Her shoulders trembled. "You didn't forget," she choked out, hands shaking as they cradled his face. "You didn't forget me." A quiet sniffle behind her. She turned to find 2 staff members, hardened caretakers, who'd dealt with the worst of aggression and trauma standing just beyond the fence line. One was wiping his eyes with the back of a sleeve. The other didn't even bother hiding the tears. "I've never seen him do that," one of them whispered. Dr. Miles had appeared beside them at some point, arms folded, eyes shining. "He remembers more than commands," she said quietly. "He remembers love." Ragnar didn't stir. He stayed in Lena's lap, still as a statue, eyes closed, breathing synced to hers, like he knew this moment was the kind that stitched lives back together. And for the first time in years, Lena didn't feel like a girl who had let go. She felt like someone who had been found. They gave her a cot, just outside Ragnar's kennel, tucked against the cold cement wall of the Ridge Valley bunkhouse. It creaked every time she moved, but Lena didn't complain. She'd brought a blanket of her own, the same one she had sewn years ago, paw print and all, faded now but intact. She unrolled it slowly, laying it over the cot, as if draping memory itself. Ragnar watched her from behind the mesh gate, silent, upright, still. The scars on his muzzle glowed faintly in the lantern light. He didn't whimper. He didn't pace. He just stared, as if daring time to lie to him again. The staff had turned in, lights low across the facility. Only the hum of a wall heater and the soft ticking of a far-off clock filled the silence. Lena lay back on the cot, her fingers brushing the edge of the blanket. "You don't have to," she whispered toward the kennel, "but I'm here." No movement. No sound. She closed her eyes. Maybe 10 minutes passed. Maybe less. Then, a soft click. The latch. The unmistakable metallic lift of a protocol breaking. She sat up just in time to see Ragnar nudge the door open with his nose. Someone had forgotten to lock it. Or maybe... No. She didn't need to believe in magic. Just in moments. Ragnar walked slowly toward her. Not the precise gait of a soldier, but the gentle sway of something ancient reclaiming peace. He stopped beside the cot, tilted his head once, then stepped up and curled at her feet. No command, no hesitation, just memory, just home. Lena shifted down, legs brushing his warm fur, and curled beneath the blanket. "You always knew when to break rules," she murmured, tears catching on a laugh. He let out a soft exhale, nostrils fluttering. No one came. No one disturbed them, not even Dr. Miles, who stood quietly in the hallway with her arms crossed, watching through the crack of the door, eyes shining with something close to reverence. That night the old warrior didn't guard a perimeter. He guarded a heartbeat. And for the first time in too many years, neither of them had to fall asleep alone. It started with a question over breakfast. Lena sat beside Dr. Miles at the long wooden table in the Ridge Valley mess hall, nursing a chipped mug of black coffee. Sunlight streamed in through the high windows, catching flecks of dust in the air like fireflies caught mid-hover. "Have you seen the pups from Lot C?" a young staffer named Gabe asked, flipping through his clipboard. "There's a female Snow, maybe 10 months. She just alert-tracked a visitor's insulin drop before the guy even knew." Lena looked up. "That's advanced?" Gabe chuckled. "Advanced is one word. Weird is another." "She didn't just alert. She signaled, backed off, then fetched the man's medical pouch from his truck." Dr. Miles narrowed her eyes, suddenly alert. "What signal?" Gabe hesitated. Left paw stomp, then tail flick. Then she sat, real specific. "We didn't train her for that." Silence. Dr. Miles put down her mug, slow. Her mind already arranging puzzle pieces that hadn't been touched in years. "That was Ragnar's old alert pattern," Lena said quietly. Gabe blinked. "Wait, what?" Dr. Miles stood. "How many pups from Lot C are demonstrating this?" 3, Snow, Echo, and one named Flint. He's skittish, but ran a textbook hallway clear last week. No one taught him that either. They left their coffee to go cold. In the records room, dust clung to manila folders like secrets that didn't want to be touched. Lena flipped through pages with Gabe and Dr. Miles watching. Breeding logs, adoption transfers, official files marked with the government's old canine unit emblem. "Ragnar never bred," Miles whispered, more to herself than anyone. "We spayed and neutered all field survivors, especially canine classifieds." But there it was, a file stamped 6 years ago, labeled simply Rainer 014A, not Ragnar, but the birth date was close. Breed code matched, temperament tags mirrored his. "No microchip lineage," Gabe muttered. "But look at this genetic indicators flagged for MK Raptor trait grouping." Lena froze. She'd seen that phrase before, in a classified archive she accessed by accident during one of her trauma research projects. MK Raptor was military shorthand for canines engineered for independent pattern learning, once deemed too volatile for reproduction. Dr. Miles slowly leaned back, a chill running up her spine. "Someone cloned him," she said, barely above a breath, "or bred him off grid, without reporting." Lena looked at the name on the top corner of the form, a blurred signature. But just visible underneath the layers of copy and time, CPT Malcolm Voss, a name they'd all assumed was long buried under government secrecy. Outside, beyond the barn, a low bark rang out, sharp, measured. Lena stepped to the window. Snow, the young pup, had just frozen in front of a hawk's shadow body, rigid, nose to the wind. Then came the stomp. Tail flick, sit, exact, down to the heartbeat. Ragnar's legacy had never left, not entirely. The archive smelled of iron filings and forgotten ink. Lena, Dr. Miles, and Gabe huddled over a battered file cabinet in the back corner of Ridge Valley's office barn, its drawers warped from years of prairie humidity. Gabe had pried the lock with a flathead screwdriver, and the metal gave way with a reluctant groan that echoed down the hallway like a warning. Inside, folders lay in no discernible order, yellowed dividers, redacted memos, loose Polaroids that had long since lost their color. Dr. Miles leafed through them, her latex-gloved fingers trembling just enough to rattle the paper. A single envelope, stamped "Confidential, Bio-Procurement," slid free and fluttered to the dusty floor. Lena stooped to pick it up. Her pulse quickened at the weight too heavy for letters, too deliberate to be miscellaneous. She cracked the wax seal and poured the contents onto the tabletop. 3 authorization forms bearing the crest of a now-defunct military medical branch. A chain of custody log listing specimen IDs that began with SNTL-07 Ragnar's old designation. A flash drive labeled in smudged Sharpie, Voss Gen Series. And tucked behind the paperwork, a grainy photograph of a stainless steel lab tray holding cryogenic vials, each tagged Project Sentinel Legacy Litter. Dr. Miles let out a slow, horrified breath. "Harvest signatures. Taken during post-op recovery," she whispered, running a finger beneath the date. June 20th, 2015. 3 weeks after Ragnar's surgery for his shattered paw. Gabe's eyes widened. "So while you were repairing the fracture," he said, voice shaking, "someone else was collecting genetic material." Lena felt the room tilt. Memories of Ragnar in that post-operative kennel flashed through her mind. The bandaged leg, the woozy eyes, his trust in the hands that patched him. She rubbed her temples, swallowing bile. Gabe plugged the flash drive into his tablet. Lines of code, breeding charts, and time-stamped video thumbnails flickered on screen. One thumbnail froze their breath, Ragnar neck shaved, IVs in both forelegs lying unconscious, while a pair of gloved hands worked off camera. The metadata stamped the frame with the same June date. Dr. Miles steadied herself against the desk. "They never logged this with us. They hijacked a recovery unit, set up an unsanctioned extraction, and shipped the sample to a private biotech kennel in Wyoming." She scrolled farther. "Apex Gen Animal Research Facility. Address, a rural stretch of road no one at the preserve had ever heard of." Lena's voice was a rasp. "That facility closed 2 years ago. Environmental violations, illegal storage of sedatives." She tapped the next folder. Photos appeared. Rows of concrete runs, dim fluorescent lights, pups staring through chain link. Some had Ragnar's eyes, amber, intelligent, wary. Others had his scar pattern laser-etched into IDs at their collars, and every report that followed carried one phrase under purpose: ideal canine zero hesitation, independent problem-solving, absolute handler imprint. "Perfect dogs," Gabe whispered. "No moral leash, just programmed guardians." "But not programmed for compassion," Lena shot back. "They copied his instincts, not his choice." Her fists clenched. They forgot that what made Ragnar extraordinary was that he decided to protect. The last document landed like a hammer. Breeding cycle projection. 27 viable offspring planned over 5 years. Yet only 5 pups resided at Ridge Valley. The others, no record. Miles' eyes hardened. Someone is still moving these dogs, selling them, maybe. If Ragnar's progeny are out there, they're being raised as tools, not companions. Lena folded the chain of custody log, slipped it into her backpack. We take copies of everything, encrypt the originals, and lock this cabinet till we know who to trust. Then we track the paper trail, Apex Gen, Captain Voss, whoever signed these forms. If they profited off Ragnar's DNA, they'll have left a financial footprint. Gabe's jaw set. And if they're still breeding? Then we shut it down, Dr. Miles answered, steel in her voice. For Ragnar. For every pup trained to follow orders they never asked for. A distant bark snapped their focus. A pup out in Lot C practicing the same silent sit-alert Ragnar once invented. The sound carried across the pasture, caught in the rafters of the old barn, and landed in the trio's chests like a vow. Lena closed the folder with deliberate care. "First we protect the ones here," she said, voice calm but fierce. "Then we go find the rest." Outside, clouds gathered over Ridge Valley, rolling dark and fast across a pale sky, as if echoing the storm that had just broken loose inside the sanctuary's walls. Night in Ridge Valley came without street lamps, only moonlight rinsing the paddocks a cold silver. Lena stayed in the cedar-scented guest lodge, a short uphill walk from the kennels. She'd spent the evening scanning bank transfers tied to Apex Gen, but the numbers were beginning to swirl, and she finally surrendered to sleep. A soft scrape at the porch woke her just past midnight. She sat up, heart thumping. Wind? Raccoon? She slipped on boots and opened the cabin door a cautious inch. A small silhouette stood at the bottom step, sable coat, oversized paws, ears not yet settled into their final tilt. The pup froze under the porch light, head cocking as if studying her the way a child studies a long-lost photograph. Snow? No. Snow wore a bright red collar. This pup's was plain canvas, frayed where a tag had been ripped away. Lena knelt slowly. "Hey there, sweetheart. How did you—" The pup bounded up the steps, nose twitching, tail wagging in frantic half circles. He sniffed Lena's blanket still folded on the porch rocker, then pressed his forehead to her knee with a relieved whine. Behind her, gravel crunched. Ranger Holt emerged from the darkness, flashlight sweeping. "Little escape artist," he muttered. "We just sounded a perimeter alert pen gate loose on Lot C. Nearly gave the interns heart attacks." The beam landed on the pup's flank. A faint numeric tattoo glimmered under the fur. SNTL-076B. Lena's pulse spiked. 6th litter, B series, Ragnar's line. Holt reached for the pup's scruff, but the puppy ducked away, planting himself between Lena and the ranger with a tiny, stubborn growl. It wasn't ferocious, more confused, protective. "Easy, buddy," Holt soothed. "No one's—" A deeper rumble cut him off. Ragnar appeared from the tree line, ghost quiet despite the brace of his aging joints. He trotted up the steps, head lowered, gaze locked on the pup, not hostile, not curious, but assessing, like a commander appraising a new recruit. The pup's growl vanished. He sat, ears flattened, tail sweeping the boards. Ragnar sniffed once, then licked the youngster's muzzle in unmistakable gesture of acceptance. Holt exhaled. "Well, I'll be. He's never greeted any dog like that." Lena's throat tightened. She traced the pup's shoulder with gentle fingers, feeling the ridges of bone too thin for 10 months old, but strong. He leaned into her palm the same way Ragnar used to, eyes half-closing in borrowed trust. "They're his," Lena whispered, the truth ringing in her chest like struck glass. "He knows it. And so does this little one." Ragnar lay down beside them, front paw crossing protectively over the pup's foreleg. No growl, no tension. only a quiet, primal certainty that the search, at least for this piece of his scattered bloodline, was over. For a long moment nothing moved but the wind through juniper branches, the legacy of a stolen lineage, finding its way home under an indifferent moon. "Let's get them inside," Holt said softly. "Paperwork can wait till morning." Lena gathered the pup into her arms. He sighed against her collarbone as though he'd finally reached the coordinates written somewhere deep in his bones. Ragnar rose to flank her, matching each of her steps up the hallway as he had years ago in countless hospital corridors, ensuring that this time no one took family away without a fight. The sky over eastern Wyoming was the color of tarnished, nickel-flat matte, refusing to reflect even a sliver of sun. Lena tightened her windbreaker as the rental SUV crunched along a two-track leading to the abandoned Apex Gen campus. The place had been shuttered for environmental violations, but rumors said the real work never stopped. Only slipped underground, off-ledger, financed by private contracts, hungry for perfect canines. Dr. Elena Miles sat in the passenger seat, a camera rig tucked in her lap. A laminated badge hung from her neck, Wildlife Frontiers Documentary Unit, a half-truth, polished into a disguise. Lena wore the same badge, but her palms still sweated. She kept seeing Ragnar's eyes in the rear view. "Find out who took pieces of me." The chain-link gate yawned open on poorly oiled rollers. A guard in civilian fatigues waved them through, more bored than suspicious. Beyond, prefab concrete blocks squatted among sagebrush, their windows smeared by years of grit. A faded sign read, "Authorized personnel only, bio-containment sector." Someone had spray-painted "Keep Out" beneath it, but the arrow led them in. Inside, the corridors smelled of bleach and cold metal. The fluorescent lights buzzed like agitated hornets. An escort, clipboard in hand, recited tourist facts. "Our program preserves elite working dog bloodlines. You'll see pups undergoing scent imprinting and obstacle training. No fear-based methods, all positive reinforcement." His voice was memorized, lifeless. They reached Observation Bay 3A gallery with one-way glass. Behind it, a vast hangar-style arena pulsed with LED strips along the floor. 20-odd German shepherds and Malinois moved through drills directed by silent handlers in black masks. No words, no praise, just clickers and hand signals. Lena's breath hitched. Each dog pivoted with machine-like precision, clearing hurdles, freezing mid-stride, dropping into submissive crouches. There was no tail wagging, no quick glance for approval, just compliance. Elena lifted the camera, pretending to capture B-roll, but her whisper trembled. "Pure obedience. Zero affection." The escort beamed, misreading her tone. "Efficiency is love in this line of work." Lena pressed her fingertips to the glass. A young sable pup limped at the end of the line-left rear leg taped, eyes glassy with exhaustion. He missed a signal by half a beat. A handler snapped his fingers. The pup flinched, corrected, and held a statuesque downstay while the line advanced. No pat, no reassurance. Just relief at avoiding whatever consequence waited off-screen. Ragnar's old training logs flashed through Lena's mind. Pair every command with purpose, every purpose with trust. Here, purpose had devoured trust and left only hunger for perfection. Elena's camera zoomed in on the pup's flank. Tattoo, SNTL 079C, 9th litter. Third pup. A chill spider walked Lena's spine. She set her jaw, turning to the escort. "What happens to the dogs that don't meet benchmarks?" He blinked. There, reevaluated. Reevaluated where? Before he could answer, a metallic yelp erupted beyond a side door. The escort flinched, shuffled papers. Isolated training wing, not on today's tour. Lena stepped toward the door. The escort blocked her path, smile vanishing. Elena lowered the camera, voice crisp. Our documentary focuses on full-cycle welfare. Isolation protocols are critical narrative context. We'll need footage. A tense beat. He relented, swiping a card. The lock clacked open, exhaling chilled air that reeked of antiseptic and wet fur. Rows of chain-link kennels lined the hall, each holding a single dog tethered to a floor anchor. Muzzles on, blankets gone, water dishes half empty. Some dogs paced figure eights, others stared at nothing, pupils blown wide. The limp pup from the arena now lay in the first kennel, breathing shallow, gauze ribboning his paw. He lifted his head as Lena approached, nose working the air searching for something he didn't yet understand. She crouched, voice quaking. "Hey, little warrior." A flicker of recognition, not of her, but of something carried in her scent. Legacy, bloodline. Tears blurred the bars. Elena squeezed her shoulder, eyes blazing. "We have everything we need," she murmured, meaning much more than footage. They walked out in silence, badges suddenly heavy around their necks. The escort locked the hall behind them, unaware he'd just guided two intruders into the heart of a scandal waiting to be burned open. Back in the SUV, Lena clutched the camera cards like detonators. "They're not dogs to them," she whispered. "They're patents." Elena started the engine. "Then we expose the inventors." The wheels spat gravel as they drove toward the horizon, the tarnished sky now streaked with amber, a warning flare refusing to be ignored. The motel Wi-Fi crackled like bad radio, but Room 12's curtains were shut tight against the neon vacancy sign. Lena paced between the twin beds while Dr. Miles watched the parking lot through a cracked blind. The thumb drive from the facility lay on the dresser encrypted, useless, until a knock rattled the door. 3 taps. 2, 1. The pattern Gabe had texted. Lena opened the door an inch. Gabe Foster Ridge Valley's resident code wrangler slipped inside, hoodie up, backpack slung over one shoulder. His cheeks were windburned from the 2-hour ride on a borrowed dirt bike. "Had to ditch my phone," he whispered. "Facility security pinged every tower after your tour. They know something's missing." "Then let's hurry," Lena said, heart hammering. Gabe upended the backpack. A rugged laptop, a tangle of patch cables, a portable hotspot, and a battered external drive plastered with retro game stickers. He flipped open the lid, and the motel bulb reflected off lines of code scrolling like green rain. "Encryption's military grade," he muttered, plugging in the lab's thumb drive. "But every safeguard leaves footprints. We exploit the lazy ones." While Gabe's fingers danced, Lena replayed the images burned behind her eyes. Kennels without blankets, pups pacing like ghosts, that limp sable stamped with Ragnar's lineage. Fury kept her steady. A progress bar crawled 10%. 38. 62. Gabe exhaled. Almost. The motel lights flickered. Dr. Miles cursed under her breath. "Backup generator just kicked. We've got company?" A white SUV idled across the street, windows black. 2 silhouettes, no plates. Gabe yanked a flash drive from his pocket, slotted it. "We dump directly cut the decrypt halfway. Raw sectors, no headers." The bar hit 87% when footsteps echoed outside, heavy, deliberate. "Time's up," Lena hissed. "Pull it now and we lose integrity," Gabe said. Dr. Miles crossed the room, slipped a tranquilizer dart from her med kit into her sleeve. If they breach, we stall. 92%. 94. A fist pounded the door. Facility security, open up. Gabe's eyes stayed glued to the screen. 4 more seconds. 99%. A second fist slammed. This one sounded metallic. Crowbar. Lena grabbed the finished flash drive, shoved it into her boot, and kicked the laptop shut. Gabe yanked the power cord. The screen went black. Dr. Miles cracked the door. "Guests are sleeping." The crowbar shoved harder. A man in a facility badge shoved inside, another behind him. Both wore stun batons. "I'm a licensed veterinarian," Miles said coolly, blocking their path. "This is private." The lead guard raised the baton. That's when Lena stepped forward, holding up the original facility, thumb drive the dummy. "Looking for this?" She tossed it to him. While his eyes followed the arc, Gabe slipped past and flicked the motel's hall fire alarm lever. Sirens wailed, sprinklers hissed alive, drenching everyone. Confusion fractured the room. Guard number 2 lunged. Dr. Miles jabbed the tranquilizer into his shoulder. He stumbled, bat clattering. The first guard cursed, pocketing the useless drive as he dragged his partner out under the eyes of evacuating guests. Within seconds, the corridor was chaos alarms, water, shouting. Perfect cover. Gabe stuffed the laptop into a trash bag. Lena tugged her jacket over her soaked boot, the real drive secure against her ankle. They slipped out the bathroom window, into the alley, rainwater and sprinkler runoff sluicing down their faces. Behind them, the guard roared orders. Sirens grew distant. Gabe's dirt bike waited under a tarp. Lena swung a leg over behind him, arms tight around the tech's waist. Dr. Miles climbed into her Subaru, engine already growling. As gravel spat beneath tires, Lena glanced back once. Facility security scrambled in red strobe glow, clutching a decoy drive loaded with cat video bloopers Gabe had prep-pasted over the encryption headers. In her boot burned 40 gigabytes of truth time stamps, genome maps, payment ledgers, and night vision footage of illegal harvests, evidence no NDA could bury. She pressed her forehead to the tech's back and breathed, memory of Ragnar's steady heartbeat guiding hers. For the first time since opening those rust-smelling files, hope felt heavier than fear, because the story was no longer about what had been stolen. It was about what they were taking back. The upload finished at 3:17 a.m., Pacific time an hour, when most of the country still slept and search engine bots roamed like insomniac insects. Lena watched the progress bar turn green, then severed the VPN chain linking 5 disposable servers. The evidence 40 gigabytes of genetic heist now lived on 3 mirrored clouds and 1 dark site forum frequented by investigative journalists. She signed the leak Shepherd 0 and added a single line of text. They patented loyalty. The dogs had no choice. Here is the proof. Give them a voice. Then she closed the laptop, pushed it aside, and waited for dawn. By mid-morning, Project Sentinel trended on every major platform. A whistle-stop chronology unfolded in real time. 07:12 a.m. AP Wire publishes a breaking secret K9 breeding ring exposed brief linking to redacted files. 07:46 a.m. A veterinary ethics blogger unredacts payment ledgers connecting Apex Gen to a web of shell companies and private security contractors. 08:10 a.m. Video clips hit Twitter. Pups in muzzles, handlers giving shock-freezing commands, surgical harvest of DNA vials. 08:38 a.m. A retired Special Forces handler posts side-by-side stills. Ragnar saving a wounded civilian in Kandahar, leaked helmet cam, versus Ragnar curled beside a bald, frail girl in a hospital bed. Caption: same dog, two wars, one heart. 09 o'clock a.m. Network anchors drop mid-segment to cover a hastily scheduled DOJ press conference. 09:27 a.m. The phrase, "dog who brought the program down," flashes across cable chyrons. Ragnar's hospital photo, paw print blanket and all, becomes the story's visual shorthand. Calls pour into Ridge Valley. Reporters camp outside the gate. Satellite vans line the gravel road like metal cattle. Dr. Miles handles statements with clipped calm. "Yes, we are cooperating. Yes, federal agents have secured all remaining pups." She never mentions Lena by name. Inside the lodge, Lena scrolls the wildfire she started. Her fingertips buzz with adrenaline, but her stomach knots. The world suddenly knows Ragnar's face, but not the girl who loved him. She wants it that way. Truth doesn't need her autograph. Gabe bursts in, phone aloft. "Look, BBC picked it up, and the Post just ran front-page PDFs of the breeding log." She nods, half listening. Every headline strikes two notes: horror at the cruelty, awe at the dog whose stolen genes became evidence. Ragnar, the silent whistleblower, hero of two battlefields. Canine number 07. Part of Lena aches. Ragnar never asked to be a symbol. But another part swells with fierce relief. The pups he never got to meet are safer now because the world is watching. Noon. A knock. Dr. Miles steps in, hair windswept from the media trench. "FBI's drafting warrants. Apex Gen's founders have gone dark. But we recovered 10 more pups from a private airstrip in Utah. They're en route to us." Lena exhales a shaky breath. Miles softens. "You okay?" "Ask me tomorrow," Lena murmurs, managing a smile. She walks to the window. Beyond the field, Ragnar patrols the perimeter with quiet authority, flanked by Snow and the limping pup now dubbed Echo. Cameras zoom from behind the property line, but Ragnar ignores them, ears tuned only to the rustle of grass, the heartbeat of his charges. A reporter's voice wafts on the wind. "Is that the original sentinel dog?" Ragnar pauses, nose in the air, then continues his round, unconcerned. Lena touches the glass. He doesn't care about fame. He just wants them safe. Evening newscasts lead with synchronized headlines. Exclusive: government admits knowledge of rogue breeding project. Whistleblower upload traced to anonymous source, Shepherd 0. They play the helmet cam clip again. Ragnar sprinting through gunfire, dragging a wounded soldier by the vest. They cut to the hospital photo, Ragnar's head on a sick child's chest. Lower third banners read, "Guardian Spirit." Across social feeds, veterans leave comments. "He saved my unit in 16. Parents post, "My son's service dog sensed his seizures. Thank you for sharing." Trainers argue ethics. Activists demand oversight. Lawmakers vow hearings. Lena stays silent. Lets truth speak. The only acknowledgement she needs comes at midnight, when she walks the dark path to Ragnar's open kennel. He lifts his head, amber eyes reflecting starlight. Echo and Snow doze nearby. She kneels, lays a hand on his scarred neck. "They know now," she whispers. "All of them." Ragnar exhales, rests his head against her knee, the same weight that once steadied a dying girl. Outside, the media storm rages, but in this circle of quiet breath and beating hearts, justice feels less like noise and more like a pulse finally sinking to its rightful rhythm. The gravel drive to the old Montana homestead curved through aspen stands, now tinged with early summer green. Lena eased the pickup to a halt beside the weather-worn barn, the engine ticking as it cooled. In the truck bed, two adolescent shepherds, Snow and Echo, stuck their noses to the breeze, ears dancing at 1,000 new scents. Ragnar sat between them like a seasoned general on furlough, gray threading his muzzle, the calm gravity of years in his amber eyes. The screen door creaked open. Rachel and Evan Avery stepped onto the porch, sun at their backs. The farmhouse hadn't changed. White clapboard, peeling in places, window boxes crammed with purple verbena. Yet the hand-painted sign by the gate was new: Avery Haven, Canine Rehabilitation and Family Sanctuary. Lena's heart pinched. What began as her parents' retirement idea after the media storm had become a registered nonprofit in under a year. Contracts with the VA, grants from animal-assisted therapy foundations, even a tiny visitor center out by the hayfield, all rooted in the memory of a dog who refused to abandon a girl in a hospital bed. She opened the tailgate, clicked her tongue once. Ragnar leapt down with surprising grace, joints creaking only slightly. The pups followed Snow, bounding ahead, Echo pausing to sniff every footprint as though each told a story. Her mother reached them first, dropping to her knees in the dust. Ragnar lowered his head for her palms, the way he had the night she handed him over to Ridge Valley long ago. Tears sparkled in Rachel's lashes. "Welcome home, soldier." Behind her, Evan cleared his throat, pretending something in the air made his eyes water. Lena slipped an arm around his waist, and for a quiet moment the four of them, parents, daughter, and the dog who wove their lives together, stood in a loose, trembling huddle. A distant whistle cut the hush young volunteers calling afternoon feeding. The property was alive with motion. Two golden retrievers chasing a ball by the orchard, a one-eyed Malinois trotting after a wheelchair-bound veteran who laughed like he'd rediscovered oxygen. "Come on," Evan said, voice thick. "There's someone I want Ragnar to meet." They walked the worn trail toward the back meadow, the same path Lena had taken as a child, bald-headed and dreaming, her blanket trailing behind her. The grass reached their knees now, dotted with purple lupine and wild yarrow. A breeze carried the scent of creosote and cut hay. At the crest of the hill, a paddock gate swung open. Inside, a chocolate-coated shepherd mix still lanky with youth-practiced search and find with a trainer. The dog froze at the newcomers, nose twitching, then broke into an exuberant gallop, barreling straight at Ragnar. Snow barked an excited greeting. Echo skittered sideways. Ragnar held steady. The young shepherd skidded to a halt inches away, tail helicoptering. He dipped his head submissive, eager, then nudged Ragnar's chin with a soft yap. Lena sucked in a breath. "Who's this?" Evan smiled. "Donor pup from a rescue near Cheyenne. DNA test flagged him. 94% match to Ragnar's line. Must have slipped through the Apex Gen pipeline before they shut down. Shelter staff called him Chance. We thought it fit." Ragnar sniffed the pup's ear, gave a rumbling chuff of benediction. Chance responded with a joyful spin, and for an instant Ragnar's tail thumped the grass, a spark of puppyhood reclaimed. Lena pressed a knuckle to her lips, swallowing a wave of emotion. She pictured the headline still pinned to her dorm wall, "Dog Who Brought the Program Down." Yet here, among rustling grass and morning glory vines, Ragnar wasn't a symbol. He was simply the patriarch of a family stitched back together from stolen fragments. They moved into the meadow proper, the pups fanning out like scouts. Lena's blanket-faded ivory, paw print dull but intact, was spread beneath the leaning cottonwood tree, set there earlier by her mother. Lena sank to the ground, back against the trunk. Ragnar circled once, then settled with a groan, head in her lap as though no day had passed since the hospital nights. Snow trotted over, carrying a squeaky toy shaped like a heart. Echo flopped at Lena's feet, hind leg, the one once bandaged in that cruel facility, now strong enough to kick playfully at butterflies. Chance bounded between them all, a living testament that healing could propagate down bloodlines. Rachel set a picnic basket beside the blanket lemonade, apple slices, and homemade peanut butter biscuits shaped like bones. "Therapy dog treats," she announced, winking. "Approved by our veterinary board." Snow snatched one mid-sentence. Echo waited for permission. Chance tried to obey, failed, and stole the biggest biscuit anyway. Laughter rippled through the grass. Farther downslope, a group session began under the pergola, a veteran practicing grounding techniques with a yellow lab. A child with anxiety learning to match breathing with a calm spaniel. None of it would exist without the chain of events that started in this very meadow. A lost military dog, a sick girl, a family willing to break rules for compassion. Lena traced the ridges of Ragnar's scarred ear. "We made it back," she whispered. The old shepherd lifted his eyes, cloudy at the edges now, but still bright at the core. He nudged her hand once, then looked at the trio of pups wrestling in clover, a quiet pride radiating from his posture. Evan set 2 mugs of steaming chamomile beside his daughter. "Board meets next week to finalize the extension paddock. Enough room for 20 more rehabs." Rachel spread a donor brochure in Lena's lap. On the cover, Ragnar and Lena captured in soft focus under the cottonwood, a tagline reading, "Guardians Together." Lena brushed a tear she hadn't meant to shed. "I never wanted to be anyone's poster child." "Then don't," her mother said gently. "Just keep telling the truth. The rest will follow." Snow yipped, tearing after Chance. Echo barreled into them, and all 3 tumbled down the hill toward a patch of Indian paintbrush, petals exploding around them like confetti. Ragnar's ears flicked forward, instinctively assessing. But when Lena gave a soft whistle, he relaxed, trusting the world, for once, to take care of what he loved. A cloud shifted, sunlight gilding the tall grass. The meadow brimmed with layered heartbeats, human and canine, old and new woven into a single rhythm that felt astonishingly, defiantly whole. And for the first time since the day she let Ragnar slip into the Ridge Valley brush, Lena felt no echo of loss, no unfinished chord. Only the steady thrum of belonging, humming through every blade of grass beneath the sky, finally bright enough to illuminate what they had all fought so hard to save. Late afternoon light pooled beneath the cottonwood like warm honey, turning every blade of grass around the trunk into a small, glowing filament. Ragnar lay there, exactly where he'd once curled as a half-starved cub, paws crossed, muzzle resting on earth that remembered him. A faint breeze teased the silver threads in his coat. With each exhale, a tuft of dandelion seeds lifted, drifted, and caught the sun. Lena crossed the meadow alone, shoes dangling from 2 fingers, toes brushing soft clover. From a distance she almost mistook him for a patch of shadow. Time had sculpted new hollows around his shoulders, softened muscle into sinew. Yet dignity still radiated from him, an invisible mantle no years could peel away. Her handmade blanket ivory squares, pieced from hospital gowns and childhood flannel, was folded over her forearm. The fabric had survived laundromats, dorm rooms, motel getaways, and the passenger seat of countless rescue runs, Some stitches were frayed, but the embroidered name and paw print refused to fade. She knelt. Grass whispered against her calves. Ragnar's ear flicked, but he didn't lift his head. He'd chased Snow and Echo through the orchard that morning, nipped Chance's heels when the pup grew too bold, then supervised a therapy session by merely lying near a veteran in tremor. Now, exhaustion tugged his eyelids. For once, he allowed it to win. Lena unfolded the blanket in one slow breath, shaking sunlit motes from the fabric. She laid it over his back, smoothing it from withers to haunch, just as she'd done the very first night in room 214 when machines beeped and nurses whispered about odds. Her thumb found the old paw print thread pilled, outline crooked, and pressed there gently. "Rest, warrior," she whispered. "You earned it twice over." From the porch her mother watched, one hand over her heart. Inside the barn, volunteers paused their chatter. Even the pups, sensing ceremony, stilled at the pasture's edge. All eyes turned toward the tree where beginnings and endings seemed to braid into the same column of light. Ragnar inhaled deep, as if tasting seasons layered in the soil. Then he exhaled, letting his body sink an inch deeper. The ground accepted him like an old friend, and the blanket settled with the hush of a secret finally spoken aloud. Lena sat beside him, back against the trunk, knees drawn. She closed her eyes and listened. To the wind combing the tall grass, to distant laughter from a rehabilitation exercise, to the creak of the farmhouse screen door. Beneath it all was Ragnar's breathing slow, steady, unmistakably alive. She pictured the first time she'd seen him, bones sharp beneath matted fur, and the last time she'd let him disappear into wild brush. Then she pictured tomorrow, school groups arriving to learn about trauma-informed training, vets who would find calm in the gentle resistance of a leash held by Snow or Echo, donors reading progress reports stamped with Avery Haven's new seal. Another breath. She spoke softly, more to the meadow than to herself. "We thought our story was about survival. Turns out it was the prologue to service." Ragnar's tail thumped once against the grass, as if in agreement, or maybe in dream. Sun dropped lower, tinting the world bronze. Over by the paddock, Chance barked at his own shadow. Echo answered with an enthusiastic yowl. Snow trotted to the cottonwood, plopped beside Ragnar, and rested her chin on the blanket's edge, 3 generations of a bloodline reclaimed, stitched back together under one tree. Lena reached for a leather-bound notebook tucked into her pocket. She flipped to a blank page, uncapped a pen, and wrote a single heading. Chapter 1. Guardians at Home. Because this hush, wrapped in gold light and heartbeat, wasn't an epilogue. It was the first line of a new volume, written on land that hummed with hard-won peace, starring a dog who once wandered half-lost through a safari and the woman he'd quietly raised into purpose. When she finished the line, she leaned over, pressed a kiss to Ragnar's forehead, and whispered a promise the wind carried through the grass. "As long as you sleep, I'll keep watch. When you wake, we'll work again. Together." And beneath the same cottonwood that had witnessed an orphaned cub and a terminal child forge an impossible pact, the blanket billowed once in the mellow breeze, settled, and began absorbing the warmth of all the living still left to do. Twilight slipped over the meadow like a silk veil, turning every stem of grass a muted indigo. Fireflies, those tiny lanterns Lena once compared to hope pulsed near the creek, while the first lone cricket tuned its strings. From the cottonwood's highest branch, a meadowlark gave 2 final chirps before surrendering the stage to night. Beneath that tree, Ragnar slept the way old guardians do, head on crossed paws, ear flicking at distant sounds, lungs drawing slow, measured drafts of lilac-scented air. The handmade blanket hugged the rise of his ribs, its patched squares glowing faintly in the dusk like embers banked for morning. Each exhale came with a soft rumble contentment, not fatigue. A few yards away, volunteers closed the kennel gates for evening rounds. Their laughter drifted, then quieted, sensing the hush that had settled here. Lena remained cross-legged at Ragnar's flank, elbows on knees, chin in her palms, watching the horizon fade from copper to violet. The pups had raced themselves breathless earlier, but only Snow and Echo returned to the lodge for supper. Chance lingered curiosity, tethering him near the cottonwood. Now, the young shepherd padded forward, paws silent on dew-silvered grass. He circled Ragnar once, twice, then chose a mirror position, head on paws, chest aligned with the old dog's tails almost touching. He breathed in, waited, breathed out, matching the cadence as though a hidden metronome guided both chests. Lena's throat tightened. The sight was so achingly familiar. A smaller body folding into an elder's curve, seeking warmth, guidance, belonging. Echoes of a hospital bed, echoes of a safari savanna, echoes of every place where loyalty had laid its head beside vulnerability and decided to stay. She reached out, brushing Chance's shoulder. The pup's ear twitched, but he didn't break the rhythm. Ragnar stirred, cracked one amber eye, seemed to register the shared posture, and closed it again. Approval granted. Wind moved through the cottonwood leaves with a sound like distant applause. Stars bled onto the sky, cautious at first, then bolder. Lena leaned closer, voice scarcely above the grass's sigh. "Some stories never end," she whispered, fingertips skating along the blanket's frayed edge until they found the embroidered paw print, pressed gently. They echo. Chance's breathing stuttered, just once, before sinking again. Ragnar's tail gave a single thump, as if acknowledging words that belonged as much to him as to her. Lena rested her back against the trunk, letting the rough bark ground her spine. She thought of endings life had tried to write, a diagnosis in a sterile room, a mandatory surrender at Ridge Valley's gate, an illicit breeding program meant to turn love into patent. None held. Love had revised every conclusion, penciling in new margins, adding chapters no one foresaw. Far off, the porch light flicked on. Rachel signaling bedtime. Lena lifted a hand in silent reply but didn't rise. Not yet. "Guard them," she murmured to Ragnar, though she knew he always would. She traced the blanket seam one more time, then allowed her eyes to close, not in exhaustion but in faith that the world could turn safely for a spell without her vigilance. Beside her, Chance's small breaths nested perfectly in the spaces between Ragnar's deeper ones, and the 3 heartbeats braided into a lullaby only meadows know. When the moon finally crowned the hillside, its light spilled through cottonwood leaves and painted soft halos on 2 shepherds, one seasoned by scars, one bright with beginnings, and on the woman who had learned that the quietest bonds are often the strongest. No curtain call, no need, just a story still murmuring forward, rippling through generations like the chorus of crickets now rising under a listening sky. In the hush beneath that cottonwood we're reminded why stories like Ragnar's matter. They teach us that every creature-scarred war dog or wide-eyed pup carries a heartbeat worthy of respect, protection, and hope. German shepherds exemplify this truth, courage fused with compassion, instinct tempered by choice. When we choose to see animals as partners rather than tools, we unlock a quiet power that heals trauma, bridges generations, and inspires purpose greater than ourselves. Ragnar's journey proves that love is not a luxury. It's a force capable of rewriting destinies of a sick child, a forgotten veteran, even a lineage nearly stolen for profit. By championing ethical training, responsible breeding, and sanctuary over exploitation, we honor that force and ensure future guardians grow in environments of trust. May we carry forward the quiet bond he embodied, listening more than we speak, protecting more than we take, and believing that small acts of kindness can echo farther than any command. In doing so, we not only safeguard remarkable dogs like Ragnar and his pups, we also nurture the best parts of our own humanity.